Check, check, one. Welcome everyone to this Earth Live lesson. My name is Ben Mirin, aka Ecotone, and I make music out of animal sounds that I record around the world. I'm an ethnobiologist, an explorer. I've been a TV presenter. I'm an educator and a musician. So many different things, but it's really nice to be able to get together with you here on this live stream. Thank you, Lizzie, for inviting me to be part of this. We actually just made this happen a couple days ago, so it's pretty cool. Lizzie and I met at another live stream event about a week ago and then said, we have a great idea. Let's do this again. So I was just playing some beats that I had made out of lots of different animal sounds. You probably heard some insects, some birds, some marine mammals, and even a couple of terrestrial mammals from the desert. That was a piece that combines a lot of different ecosystems together. And unfortunately, I can't play for you my whole live set. We had a couple of technical issues with running Ableton Live and a YouTube live stream simultaneously. My computer was like, no. So, but what I am able to use, what I'm really happy to be able to use still, is this RC505 loop station. That is a piece of technology that allows me to layer my own voice as well as the voices of animals. It's a live loop station that a lot of people use on stage to loop guitars and beatboxing and all kinds of stuff. So I have a background in ornithology. I've been a field ornithologist for, I guess you could argue, 20 years since I was very, very young. I first got interested in birds when I was 4. And my mom bought me a book on penguins, and I just became obsessed. I could barely read the thing, but she took me to the aquarium because she saw that there was some passion there. And she and my dad helped me explore this passion and go watch birds all over the world. But of course, I started in my own backyard. And when I wasn't outside, I was in the house doing something like this. It's called beatboxing, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before. But I would just watch cartoons when I was little and wait for the theme song to come on and then do the theme song with the actual music. And my parents probably didn't know what to think of all of that, but they let me be me, thank God. And now I've been able to explore both of these things for a long, long time. But it wasn't until I moved to New York City a few years ago. What was it now? 6 years ago. I don't live there anymore, but I spent about 6 years in Brooklyn, New York, and that was the first time in my life that I lived somewhere where I couldn't immediately go to the forest. Sure, New York has amazing parks, and if you go just outside the city, there's some incredible sort of more rural areas, but it was an adjustment for me, and I couldn't really hear birdsong outside my window. So I decided to use these tools to bring that element of my life back. I wanted to reconnect with my beloved birds. So I started sampling the sounds of birds that I just found on the internet, because I didn't know how to get bird songs at that time. And I just put them on these loop stations here, and started playing around with the sounds to create things that sounded melodious to me. It turns out this didn't just work for me, it worked for other people. I started just sharing live loops of my beatboxing and these birdsong samples in underground hip hop shows, especially with the beatbox community. They're my artistic family, and they were just fascinated. I couldn't believe it, but they were so interested in learning about the bird songs that I realized, maybe I should make some videos and share this music online and talk about the source of my inspiration and a little bit of the biology behind it. So that's what I'm going to do for you here today. Since those underground shows, I've had quite an interesting few years. I created and hosted a web series that then went on television for National Geographic. It's called Wild Beats. I was I made 4 different films about wildlife expeditions, and have recorded thousands of sounds now on 8 different trips around the world. I a computer game with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology called Beastbox, which is in the which is linked through my website in the comment section below, or the bio section below. If you go find Beastbox, you can actually activate some of these sounds for yourself and change between different samples of my beatboxing to make your own music from nature. So I've really dug into this, and I didn't think it would last this long, but this is, I guess, a testament to how special it can be to listen to your passions and apply them to the world in some way, and then learn what that means for your creativity and your inspiration and your ideas. So I've been really ecstatic to be able to pursue these projects. So without further ado, let's get back to what we were hearing before. I think to keep things simple, I'll just kick off the beat. Just a simple kind of 808 kit beat. Nice bassy drum. Come on, I'm gonna walk. Come on. So let's add the first ecosystem. I'm gonna take the drums away. So, did you hear that kind of kick drum sound? That's actually a javelina pig. It's a male pig that, when it's trying to attract mates and defend its territory, issues this kind of sound. It's a very percussive sound. Really sounds like a drum, but it's kind of cool to blend it with the drums like this. That kind of syncopated rhythm. That higher bird. Whoop, 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 whoop. That's a quail. We also have Roadrunner, which is like a sound that you may be able to hear at the beginning of the loop. It goes like ooh, 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 ooh. See if you can listen to it. Did you catch it? Let's listen again. There we go. So we also have a vulture sample. So that's a set of these Sonoran desert sounds. I combined this with another very different sound from a different part of the world. This is an empress cicada. And what's amazing about this sound is listen to how rhythmic it is. I literally did nothing to this track other than excerpt a moment from it and then throw it over a drum kit. I was just in Borneo this past January recording soundscapes with an indigenous community, and we heard these for real in the forest. It was magical. They are one of the loudest insects in the world, and they're the length of my hand. which is pretty ridiculous. I can't imagine what it would be like to hold one if it sounded off. It'd probably terrify me. But in the context of music, it's quite rhythmic and fun. And it's fun to remix it too. Reverse. Let's add in some of our largest cast of characters from these ecosystems. That kind of slap bass sound. That is a humpback whale. Different excerpts of a song. I kind of chopped them up, digitally speaking, from a field recording by Roger Payne, and then I reordered some of the pieces to create this kind of new humanized version of the melody. And then you may hear kind of a glass-like tinking sound almost. Listen. Even that kind of ping pong ball scatter at the end. Those are actually the sounds of parrotfish beaks chipping away at coral. And it's just a delightful contrast. In one ecosystem, the Great Barrier Reef, which is where a lot of the sounds that I sampled here are from, sound will travel up the food chain, starting with this kind of crackling, popping of snapping shrimp. And then when fish hear that sound, they're attracted to it because it's a sign of a healthy reef. So then they show up and they make sounds, chipping away at coral, a vibration of the swim bladder. And then when they make more and more of a ruckus, larger animals are attracted to the reef. And so sound travels all the way up until you get both ends of the spectrum, the big and the small. Check it out. Our last ecosystem in this collection is the Chesapeake Bay. So you're going to hear a very high-pitched deep, deep. In this riff, that's a field cricket. That's pretty good. It's kind of like those whistles you hear in reggaeton music. But there's also something more rhythmic and percussive down below. That's a combination of a pickerel frog vocalization and a remix of a northern mockingbird. And again, the remix is just sort of my version of taking a field recording, chopping up little pieces of the audio, and putting them on drum pads so I can play them in a new order. Oh, and you can hear Katie did the tss, 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 tss. And with the katydid, you kind of have your own set of symbols as well. So there's a lot of comparability between human instruments and these sounds from nature. But I want to emphasize, I haven't really done very much to change these animal sounds. They are all taken straight from the wild. In some cases, they're remixed a little bit by me. But there's no auto-tune, there's no sort of stretching and reshaping. That's part of the challenge and part of the joy of the work that I do is I just listen really, really closely to these animal sounds, sometimes for many hours, and I'll take a piece of paper and just write down moments in the recording that are appealing and that I want to hear again, and then I sample those. Sometimes I have to clean up the background noise because if you have lots of sound in a single ecosystem sampled together, you don't want to multiply the background by the number of animals that you have in your track, or else it'll just sound like you'll have a really intense ambient noise from the background. That's not really realistic either. So there are some artistic compromises I have to make, but I do the best work I can to stay true to the original animal sound, because that's what's so magical about it to me, is that nature's always singing and it sounds so musical by itself. It's almost like we don't need to do anything to make it beautiful, and that's really true. The more you listen to wildlife in your backyard, the more you realize that there's an orchestra right in your backyard, right where you live. And that brings me to kind of the why for why I do this work. I mentioned I went on some expeditions in the last few years. Now I'm in graduate school pursuing my PhD at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is really a lot of fun. But um, I took these instruments and these ideas to a number of different countries, and sometimes performed with local musicians and local scientists to communicate research and the richness and diversity of nature through sound on a stage. Because music is kind of like a crowbar. It opens a door to a new set of listeners, people who may not always want to tune into your traditional nature documentary. Not that those aren't cool. I love those. But, it's about giving people different ways of connecting with nature and speaking their language, because right now we need to get more people than ever connected to wildlife. The planet is not in a great state right now, and it's really so transformative to be able to find a way of celebrating nature, like creating a piece of music, creating a dance party, an anthem to your natural heritage. That experience inspires a connection and familiarity. And now that we've learned some of the voices of the song you heard at the beginning, there's a chance for us to learn more and pretty quickly, I think, fall in love with the singers. And when you love something, you're driven to protect it. That is an indispensable part of this process of bringing people to connect with nature, because we are a part of this web of life. And if we forget those connections, then we act less responsibly. We don't take into account our role as an incredibly successful species to live in harmony with the rest of the world. Um, it's always fun to think about this as an artist, because again, I talked about that negotiation between the perfectly tuned voices of nature and my artistic interpretation thereof. One of the really amazing things is that when you think about animal voices in nature, they all exist within a common sort of soundscape, right? Ecosystem has an acoustic thumbprint or a blueprint to describe really all the different aspects of life that are happening in that place. But there's a hypothesis in my field called the acoustic niche hypothesis that posits that a lot of different animal sounds in an ecosystem have evolved to coexist and occupy different spaces in a frequency bandwidth, and sometimes different times of day. So if you imagine animals singing in the morning, the afternoon, or at night, they may have evolved their vocal behaviors so that they don't overlap with each other. And the same is true about singing high versus singing low. There are different frequency bandwidths within the full audible spectrum, which for us is from 20 hertz to about 20 kilohertz. And within that spectrum, there's kind of limited space. So animals have had to negotiate and kind of jostle and find these little pockets, acoustically speaking, in which they can talk to each other. Now, when we hear a dawn chorus at 5 a.m., all these birds waking up, we hear a cacophony of just thousands of voices all singing at once, but they are often tuned to individual frequencies. And when you think about it, my work as a musical producer is to take those voices and any instruments I may want to add, such as the drums, or sometimes I work with indigenous instruments, or just sometimes fun classical instruments just to mix things up. But my job as a producer is to mix those individual instruments to occupy their own discrete frequency bandwidth with. So I'm essentially repeating the work of evolution, but that's the thing. My instruments are already tuned by evolution, sometimes over millions of years, to fit together naturally into a balanced soundscape. So whether it's through your music or through any kind of art, or any kind of creative expression, or even if art's not your thing, but you love being a scientist, or you love sports and you're an athlete. There's so many different ways of digging into your personal passion and applying it to the world around you and seeing what comes back. And in the case of nature, it gives an extra layer of meaning to the exercise. You are true to who you are, and then you find something even more magical in return. I mean, you've made it. You've made it. You are on a path to lifelong joy if you can do something that just makes you tick, or something that you do when you think no one's looking. Like I used to beatbox as a little kid in the bathroom, like, and then people would come in and I'd be like embarrassed. But when you apply those passions and you connect to something larger, it's really truly magical. I can see that I'm at about 20 minutes, and I think that's around the time I'm supposed to go, but I want to address some questions in the comments here. Has head of Youth Land Trust. Amazing work, Ben. Thank you. What's been the most challenging ecosystem to work in? That's a great question, and the challenges of ecosystems are different from place to place. Certainly working underwater is hard. I think for a lot of us, the idea that sound even takes place underwater is sort of baffling, but I was on an expedition to the Philippines a couple years ago to do a virtual reality shoot on a coral reef with National Geographic and some of my fellow explorers. And one of the challenges there was that we brought a big fancy hydrophone that was supposed to record in 4 dimensions, essentially to be mixed for VR, and didn't have the batteries when it showed up, so we couldn't use it. So that was one kind of fieldwork challenge, was being creative and finding new ways of just capturing sound. But we thought about the kinds of soundscapes we needed to paint an acoustic picture for our film. And especially when kids who put on the headphones are surrounded by this visual image, we wanted something that was really immersive in their headphones to make them feel like they were underwater. So I was recording everything from boat engines that we could like put, and track in different parts of the visual field, to an overall ocean ambiance, to individual sounds of turtles munching on sponges and fish vibrating their swim bladder. Sounds like this. It's really funky. Snapping shrimp, which are kind of it sounds like someone's frying bacon. It's like a staticky sound that I think a lot of viewers who have spent time underwater may remember. If they just kind of put their head underwater, they can often hear these kind of snaps, crackles, and pun pops. One of the challenges in recording in that environment was I had to, in some cases, you can't really go in the water next to your microphone the way you can when you're recording bird songs, because sound moves so differently in water that you will be picked up just by moving the water around a hydrophone, an underwater microphone. So I had to do a lot of kind of imagining what's down there. And I would lower these things off the boat. And then suddenly I would hear this like, and I was like, what is going on? I looked down, a giant wrasse had grabbed my hydrophone and was pulling it like a fishing line. I was like, no, that's it's gonna break it. So I had to negotiate with him to let it go. There are a lot of different experiences that make each ecosystem and each project unique. But that's one fun example. Any elephant sounds? Not today, unfortunately. Sorry. Sorry, Suraj. I would love to fine tune some of the kinks in the YouTube live stream setup, and then I would absolutely play some elephant sounds. Have you heard Alex Metcalf's tree listening recordings? I'm not sure. I've heard recordings of trees, and that is it is mind blowing. There are all kinds of boring insects that make these kind of scratchy, gravelly sounds. If you put a contact microphone on the bark of a tree, you of course can hear the tree itself moving with the wind. It all depends on like kind of what scale you want to get down to. If you want to amplify, if you want to stick a contact mic in the substrate, in the ground at the base of a tree, I'm not even sure what you'd hear. I would love to get my hands on a toy like that and just explore. But there are also some other I've heard legend of a recordist who captures the sound of rain on trees, and based on the resonance, the frequency, the pattern of the sounds of raindrops on the leaf shapes. Each leaf is like a different kind of drum. You can tell the species of the tree based on what the rain sounds like on that tree. I cannot do that, but that is a superpower if I've ever heard one. That is insane. But it just goes to show you how deep you can go when you really, really pay attention. So I'm at about 25 minutes now. I don't want to drag on too long, but I just want to again say thank you to Lizzie Daly for having me on as part of her Earth Live Lessons series. This is the last lesson in the series for now, but I just want to send everybody my best wishes as well, because this is a very uncertain and often difficult time. And when you have a way of connecting with the world around you, it can be extremely meditative. So I hope each of you is able to find a way of getting outside a little bit and letting go of the need to maybe plan your next project, your next trip, your next assignment, your next project for work, and just stay focused in the moment, because there is a lot of beauty in these moments as they pass us by. And if you record sound, you can capture a moment that will never be repeated again. So there's a certain meditative quality there. But whatever your passion is, just keep dancing. And I hope you apply it to nature, because we need your unique and creative perspective on the natural world so that we can come up with more solutions for how to engage with it and how to act on its behalf. So thank you very much. And I guess I'll play a little bit of music to take us out.
Come on, sing, sing. Come on, sing, sing. Come on, sing, sing. Come on, sing, sing.
Say ride that wave. Say ride that wave. Say ride that beat like an ocean wave. Nice job.
Come on, sing, sing. Come on, sing. Come on, sing, sing. Come on, sing. Come on, sing. Come on, sing. Come on, sing, sing. Come on, sing.
Thanks so much. Oh, and again, if you're interested in learning more about this material, you can visit my website, benmirin.com.